And we're live. Hiya, it's Talking Reds. I'm Josh Sexton, joined by Sean Bennett. Liverpool obviously played their first pre-season friendlies yesterday, the little half-an-hour mini-games, the madness of that. So we're going to get stuck into those and talk about some of the performances as well. Obviously, leave your comments in the comments section for us to react to, and we'll do that a bit later in the show as well. But Sean, the two games yesterday, 2 draws for Liverpool, as Ibrahima Konate said. He's feeling very sad that Liverpool didn't get the win against Stuttgart in the second one there. But I want to talk more about some of the general performances and some of the lads whose future are maybe a little bit more up in the air and sort of how they played. So we'll start with Takumi Minamino. I thought he played quite well in the game in general. I thought he was fairly bright. There's a few sort of little bits of rustiness in there, and you can never take too much from a pre-season friendly. But it feels for him like a sort of a strange pre-season really, because he wasn't one that you would sort of say was on the chopping block as such. He's obviously not been at Liverpool long enough to be in that sort of scenario, but it feels like he has to sort of prove a point to an extent.
Yeah, there is. I think from what you can take from these friendlies, I think 30 minutes is hard to take a lot from it, isn't it? I think it's part fitness exercise, part maybe shop window exercise. But I think with the fringe players, you kind of got them in 2 buckets. You've got the fringe players who've kind of been around for a while and at risk of becoming a bit stagnant. Is the motivation still there? If they've not cut through already, is that going to happen for them? Then you've also got some of the fresher ones who we are actually expecting to step up, and there is a bit of expectation from the fans and probably the manager, and I think Minamino is one of them. You know, we looked bright in spells when he did go out to Southampton, so I think he's actually got quite a big pre-season ahead of him to kind of prove if he's going to be a fixture and stay around really.
And Divock Origi is another one. It was a very Divock Origi performance, I would say, in the little half an hour run out that he got. It was very lots of step overs, a few misplaced passes and that kind of thing. And it's an interesting summer for Divock. I've spoke to some people who believe that he's obviously done this grant scheme for Liverpool University, which is unreal, by the way. And there's a few people who sort of believe that could either be his parting shot or the thing that keeps him in Liverpool. It sort of seems to me from the reports I've seen that he'll be one who does stay at Liverpool. And I think with the way Divock Origi is and the way he scored his big goals for Liverpool, we almost owe it to him to an extent to give him that chance and to give him time to keep proving himself. And then if he ends up walking away on a free at some point whenever his contract's up, then I think you just sort of say all the best to him.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think one thing to note is the thought of Divock Origi being on pens gives me shivers just because he's that chilled and cool. But yeah, he managed to bag it. But I think he's one of the players that falls into that bucket of, you know, it's been a while. Listen, if he's round the squad and he's coming on in games, I don't think he's the worst option. I think he's proved he's got the head for big games. He's that chilled, nothing really phases him. So I think if you're looking around Europe and you're looking for a backup striker, it's going to be hard to find someone who scored as big goals as he has in the big moment. So I just think he's that chilled. He's almost at risk of just becoming a bit too passive, really. Yeah, literally horizontal on the bench, isn't he? So I think he needs to have a bit of bite to him, I'd like to see. I also think it's mad that he's so happy to just stay on the bench and stay in the background, and you think, you know, have a bit more ambition, put a bit more pressure on the front three, and I think then you know, it'll put a bit more competition round the front 4 or 5, I guess, what we've got at the minute.
Yeah, one of the best things I like about Divock, or the best quotes about Divock that we've heard, was the James Milner one. He talked about Planet Divock, like he's just so chilled that it's pretty much like he's on his own planet, and maybe it's just going to be like that in pre-season friendlies. He's good vibes, so I'll take him every day of the week. Kostas Tsimikas was one of the ones who played left back in the second game. This was a Stuttgart game now that we're on to. He's another one sort of like Minamino. I think he's arrived under strange circumstances. He's had bad luck with injuries, which I suppose Minamino couldn't say, but they've both got the sort of pandemic excuse to an extent on their side in terms of, you know, just finding it harder to ingratiate themselves into the squad. And Tsimikas is one of them who I think people have probably jumped to judge a bit too quickly, and I think you could maybe see the narrative switch in this pre-season if he does put in a few good performances. And I suppose that's up to him then to sort of prove that point to people.
Yeah, you see with every club signing, like they all need a run of games to bed in, even the very best signings we've made, and he's not really had that run of games, has he? But yeah, he looked like he was unleashing his inner Andy Robbo last night, didn't he, with that assist? So yeah, I'm excited to see more of him. I actually think he's going to be a solid left-back option, and I think, you know, the amount of games that Andy Robertson's played, not just for Liverpool, but for Scotland in the summer, we're going to need him to be putting in a few games, and not just stepping in when someone's injured, but, you know, actually being like a viable rotation option.
Yeah, and it's obviously 4 years ago today that Andy Robertson joined the club as well, so a shout out to him on that special anniversary. And it's good that you mentioned that, really, because it is one of them, isn't it? Like I think the the backup fullback option is a hard position to fill, because you go out and sign a lad like Samikas, and who can only play one position. It does make it a bit more difficult, because it means there's sort of less games to use in there, and particularly when Liverpool are in so many big games, it feels like every game is sort of a cup final in most seasons for Liverpool. It means that you want to go with your best option, and I imagine Andy Robertson's the sort of person who's saying to Klopp every game, "No, Gaffer, I'm good to go, don't worry about me."
Do you know what, saying that, we talk about rotation, but then when any game comes around, we just want the best 11 on the pitch, don't we? So it's hard.
Yeah, it is tough. Another player who it has been quite tough for, particularly with injuries, is Naby Keita, and he was an interesting one yesterday. Again, sort of similar to Divock, it felt like a very Naby Keita game where he's got the step overs, there's a few tricks in there, but he was running down a few blind alleys, and obviously, as we've said from all of this, it's hard to take much away from these early pre-season games, but this pre-season overall I think could be an interesting one for Naby Keita. And this season in general, to be honest, his contract I believe is up in 2023, and you wouldn't say that it's so far he's sort of lived up to the potential that we thought he had before he came to Liverpool, but I think there's a lot of sort of factors there. I mentioned the injuries and things like that, which probably favour him a bit, the sort of mitigating circumstances, but I think this season will be a big one for him. It's time to sort of prove himself at Liverpool, I think.
Yeah, it will. I think what it looked like they did at the end of last season is, rather than trying to rush him back again, it sounded like he had a much longer rehabilitation period, and I think they were trying to do a lot of work with him to build up that strength. So really, it's not his fault about injuries, but you're looking for this, if it's going to be a season where he's going to break into the squad and get some consistent games and keep his fitness up, it's kind of got to be this season. Like, if you have another injury-ridden season again, I don't really know where that leaves him in the squad. So yeah, I think it's a big one ahead for him. Yeah,
and Oxlade-Chamberlain is another one of those who's probably sort of in a similar boat to Naby in terms of he's had his injury issues, but then you look back on last season and it's almost a bit of a missed narrative for Ox, because we always talk about the injuries with Oxlade-Chamberlain, but last season he actually wasn't injured that much. He just sort of wasn't getting his opportunity, but they've been talking about this position switch for him from this season, sort of playing more of a false nine role, and you wonder whether that will give him a new lease on life. And he looks good as well. He's got the blonde tips in his hair and all that, so he looks like he is ready for this new position.
He does. It's a weird one with Ox, because I think there's something in there that I'm not quite ready to let go. I think with your Regis and stuff, you think, oh, maybe they've had the time, but just because he was so explosive in that 2018 season when we get into the Champions League, and I feel like that player's still there. And I think the good thing about Ox is he is so versatile with positions. You've got this false nine position that's coming up, and he looks fit. I think he looks like he's sharp. He's quite mobile, isn't he? So I actually think he's got a big role to play this season. I think out of all of them fringe players that have played, he seems like he's got the most bite. He seems the fittest. I think he's gonna break through in quite a few games.
Yeah, and I've put Harvey Elliott on the list as well, because I think it's quite an interesting one with Elliott. He's obviously his future at the club is sort of not in the air. He's literally just signed his new long-term deal at the club, but particularly with the Oxlade-Chamberlain thing and the sort of switching of roles, it looked like more of a midfield role for Harvey Elliott yesterday, which I am interested in, because if they're going to be moving Oxlade-Chamberlain as a midfield option into the forward line, then maybe it makes sense to sort of play Harvey Elliott more as a midfielder.
Yeah, it does. He was kind of quite more central, I found, when he was playing yesterday. But yeah, I think I don't want to see him go back out on loan. I think he's showing that much at that age. You just hope he can get a run of games, but then we're in quite a good position where it looks like we could be starting the season with most people fit, touch every bit of wood in the room. So if everyone's fit, it might be hard for him to break through, but let's say, hopefully we get a few good cup runs. But I'm glad he's back in with the first team, because I think he's only going to get better playing around the likes of Salah and Mane and the rest of the team.
And I suppose it's a tough one for Elliott in a sense as well, because you've got Mohamed Salah on that side, and we're also used to seeing him sort of being that marauding right winger who cuts him with the left, and he's got so much pace and he's so good at finishing that you almost, when Harvey Elliott does finally come through and Mo Salah moves on, whenever that is, you'd almost expect Harvey Elliott to be in the same mould. But from the early signs, when he looks like he's not got that sort of pace, he's maybe a little bit more sort of a creative mind than Mo. Like, his first instinct is not always where is the goal, and it's not always to sort of shoot and that kind of thing. So you do wonder whether that midfield role would sort of suit him more at Liverpool as well.
Yeah, you do. I think my only worry is just he still looks a bit light.
Yeah,
if you look at him next to Mo Salah, who's got his vest up on and just looks absolutely shredded. Whether he could hold his own in the midfield is my only question mark. But if you look at a trend, he looks like an absolute fella now, doesn't he? So maybe it's only a year or two until he can maybe hold down the midfield a bit more.
This is my favourite thing about pre-season, I think, is you see all the lads who come back with like their boss tans and they're looking a bit more buff. It's like when you're in school and people come back with their boss bronzies and you're like, where they've been on holiday over the summer, you're going over asking them they brought any sweets back from duty free and all that. We'll start to go through your comments then, because you've been leaving them sort of throughout the show. A lot of shouts for the t-shirt, nice one. This is from my friends over at Clipset Podcast. There's a lot of Takumi Minamino comments. Martin O'Neill says Taki looked good in the training vids. The Wolfman's got Nard, says still like Taki, seemed odd we shipped him after he looked good against Palace. I did think the loan was a bit of a strange one, Sean, but you can sort of understand it with hindsight, because he hits the ground running at Southampton, and maybe he just needs that sort of bit of a different environment for a sort of little time there as well.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time we've signed anyone and then shipped like sign someone who's meant to be, you know, a first team, maybe first 14, 15 player, and ship them off so quick. You wonder, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a wage bill thing, if we knew we were having to recruit more people with injuries. I don't know, because that was one of the best games he had, and then he was off. But I trust Klopp. I'm sure there's a method to his madness. And maybe he knew he's the type of player that needs game time, and if he knew he wasn't going to be getting it this season, he would have completely dropped off form and everything. So yeah, maybe it's done him a bit of good to actually get a bit of Premier League game time. And, you know, from the league he's come from to where he is, and he's a pretty light player himself, I think he needed probably a bit of rough and toughening up, I think, with a few more games. And one of my sort of, well, I say favourite quotes, one of the quotes I like the most about Takumi Minamino, I think it was someone on the Anfield Wrap, I'm going to completely miscredit them because I can't remember who it was, but sort of said that I think when he came, people weren't expecting him to be an 8 million player from Salzburg, but he was literally, you know, an 8 million player from Salzburg, and I think it's fair to say that is what he's shown so far, but hopefully he can show more. Minamino was decent. The team was weaker for the first game. We actually saw Ben Davies in the flesh. Yeah, Ben Davies is a real fella. That was a surprise. That really caught me off guard. Yeah, mad. I mean, I think when the goal went in, I was thinking, I don't know if he's been playing all right here, but he seemed to pick it up. I mean, it's so hard to take anything from a 30-minute game. It is. But it's good to see him. I think we'll see more when we're playing like the proper 90-minute games. And no Nat Phillips as well, which was interesting. We'll have to have a think about that one. I think. Yeah. Hopefully that's just an injury, and he's not off to Brighton as the reports suggest. Only saw the second game. Shamikas looked lively. Naby, do not jinx it. How good is Elliot? Yeah, Elliot's unreal, mate. I think he's going to be a proper talent. All about fitness and condition at a stage. Origi needs to go, then get a backup. Who do you think our next signing will be? I have a feeling Renato Sanchez. Who do you think our next signing will be, Sean? I think it's going to be an interesting few weeks in terms of the transfers. I think it's going to be a midfielder, and I say that because we're just always in the market for midfielders, and we either play them in midfield, play them on the wing, we play them up front, we play them at centre-back, or we play them at right-back when we need them. So I think it'll be a midfielder, but I think it totally depends on the sales. But I thought it was interesting what happened with Grujic and the other fella that we sold for 6.5 million, who I'm going to be honest, I haven't really ever heard much of, but sounded like a decent fee. Like straight away, we've got about 16, 17 million there in the pot. Maybe only need to sell one more, and I think you've got enough there for probably not a starting 11 player, but someone who could be in and around that 14, 15 squad on the match day. Yeah, shout out to Grujic and Taiwo, I'm just going to say his first name. I believe his second name's Awoni, but I've probably butchered that, so I do apologise. But he was at Liverpool for 6 years, of course, before his move yesterday, so he was only 4 years off getting a what's it called, a testimonial? Memorial, that would have been dark, wouldn't it? There's a bit more about sort of homegrown players and needing to free up space in the squad. Tim Park says Ox needs to get rid of them frosted tips, can't be going around with the same hair as a 17-year-old lad. I think Ox has got that sort of vibe about him when he pulls it off. It's all very like NSYNC, 90s boy bands, isn't it? That's probably why I'm into it, because I love NSYNC. John McLean, for the last question, he says, is there an ep of the award-winning Gutter Show coming out today? And there is, so that gives me time to do the plug. There is an episode of the Gutter coming out today that is on our Anfield Wrap subscription audio platform. We also have Anfield Wrap subscription video as well. For those who don't know, that is available on YouTube. If you're someone who watched on here and you don't want to move off to another platform when you can subscribe to the videos through here, that's just £7 a month on our website for video or audio, and £10 for the full package as well. Nice one to Sean, nice one to Jarrod for filming, nice one for watching. Up the Reds.